I couldn't deal with my emotions. I couldn't deal with stress. I couldn't deal with responsibility. And when you're blackout drunk, you don't have to deal with anything.
You don't have to do anything.
Thinking back to the first time I got sober, I narrowly avoided a DUI. I was living in Atlanta. I was dating a girl, and I was driving her to work, and we were running late, and I'd been drinking. And I remember asking her, do you want to get there on time, or do you want to get there safely? And she said she wanted to get there on time.
Okay.
And I was in the HOV lane, going down 85 through the heart of Atlanta.
Oh my gosh.
Because I was in the HOV lane, it was pretty much open, but all 4 lanes to the right of us were pretty much stopped, and this guy pulled out into the HOV lane, and I rear-ended him. Luckily, I think he sort of felt like it was his fault, and probably didn't realize that I had been drinking. We just agreed that we don't need to call the cops. We can just exchange information. You need to get on your way. I need to get on my way.
You're both fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was like, perfectly normally. All right. Got out of that one. I don't think I had my wallet with me. And there was nothing abnormal about that day in terms of my drinking, other than I just happened to get into a car wreck on 85. But I was able to drive away from it, and my girlfriend didn't break up with me, so it didn't matter. And the cops didn't come, so it didn't matter.
But was she late?
She was late to work, but she was able to show her boss the picture of the crash, so it didn't matter. But I stayed drunk for the next 3 weeks while this guy called my phone incessantly, trying to get me to make a statement to my insurance company and to actually figure it out. We moved to Chicago. My dad took a job up there when I was 11 or 12, and I didn't immediately move up. I stayed with Mom, but that was a disaster. I was just a little boy that needed his dad, I think, and so that's when a lot of behavioral stuff started coming up in school, and then I went to a larger high school with 450 kids per class, downtown Chicago, and felt very alone, except for through soccer, and then eventually I got invited to hang out with a group of guys. That's sort of when I remember really looking forward to the weekends because we're gonna go drinking. The cool kids.
Okay.
Yeah. I hate to think about it in those terms, but yeah, that's what we were. At least that's how we perceived ourselves.
Okay.
Because I didn't really feel like I belonged in that group, and so I had to do something to make me feel okay being there, and usually that meant putting others down. I remember sophomore year of high school, we were drinking before a party, and that's all I really remember. Yeah. I don't remember the party. I don't think we made it to the party. We got stopped by the cops walking to the party, and they quickly realized how intoxicated I was and called an ambulance. My parents were out of town. They were in Washington, D.C. for a Chicago politician's senatorial inauguration. Okay. It's a big deal. And I capitalized on that to get out of the house and escape from the babysitter and go hang out with friends. Made the most of the night by getting completely obliterated. My sister had to come to the hospital, and then she took me back to her friend's house, whose mother was a doctor, and I woke up there. I vaguely remember the hospital, but I remember waking up at my sister's friend's house.
Okay.
But the guilt and shame didn't last very long. The cops took pictures of me, which was probably not legal. I don't know, but they took pictures of me with a bag taped to the front of my shirt that was, used to catch the vomit, and so for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I had people coming up to me like, hey, I got stopped by some cops in Jonkville Park. And so I guess these cops were like saying, you've been drinking tonight? You don't want to end up like this kid. And so I had like, you know, upperclassmen coming to me and say, oh, hey, Chris, I saw your pictures from the other night. Some cop showed them to me.
You became
and I was like,
the Don't Do Drugs poster child
yeah,
or something.
but that's not how I took it. I was like, oh, finally, I'm getting the recognition I deserve, you know? People are talking about me. Yeah, okay. Street cred, for sure. I think I even started a Facebook group after that about, like, you know, share your craziest stories.
So you liked it. You liked it.
Oh, I love the attention. The summer going into my junior year of high school, my family moved here, and I went to boarding school in North Georgia because a guy with a prestigious reputation like me, from, you know, who was living in Chicago, doesn't go to Greenville, South Carolina. I've never heard of Greenville, South Carolina, and I was furious at my parents. And
I'm too cool to go to Greenville.
I was way too cool for Greenville. So I ended up going to this boarding school because one of my good friends from Atlanta had ended up there. I think that in a lot of ways tempered my drinking because the structure, accountability, constant supervision. It was the first time I noticed the obsession.
Okay.
When I can look back and I can say, God, I would meticulously plan these weekend outings because you would have to get parental permission from my mom to like go down to Atlanta, and I chose Atlanta over Greenville, A, because I was mad at Dad, but B, because, you know, I had been in Chicago. Mom was so happy to have me close by. She was also oblivious, you know, and what she wasn't oblivious to, she was blinded by love to, you know.
So you could just give out
so
whatever.
I could get away with whatever, and so I would plan out these trips where, you know, I'd get all my friends to get weekend passes to come to my mom's house, and where we were gonna get the alcohol, who was gonna buy it, and who had cash that week and who owed from last week. And I really remember like going to great lengths to figure out how we're gonna get alcohol. I think a lot of it for me was like comfort and control, being in my own home, not having to worry about driving anywhere. I think it was about being able to control all these different factors that were necessary in order to have a good weekend. I went to Georgia State and down in Atlanta. Knew a lot of people who went down there. My mom lives in Atlanta. I remember school being really important to me. I also remember laying down on the floor of my dorm, knowing I was going to be late to my 1 o'clock class the second day of school because I was so hungover.
Okay.
That's when the choice was made. Whether I realized it or not, I knew that the benefits of going out and drinking outweighed the benefits of making it to class.
Okay.
And I couldn't do both for whatever reason. I did really poorly my first semester. I need to do well and I need to maybe prove something, but there was no verbalized pressure from my parents. They're both well educated. It was just as much as anything what I was supposed to do.
Okay.
So I remember thinking education's important. This stuff's important. Knucklehead friends that were going out and doing crazy stuff, and I remember thinking I can't go out tonight. I have class. But I also remember that only lasting a week. And then in high school, I figured out eventually would figure out what the bare minimum was to get by. But that was super structured. And once I got to college and realized there was zero structure and zero accountability and I could do what I want, then I did what I wanted to do. And that has been whatever takes the least possible effort. And drinking, I didn't have to worry about class. I didn't have to worry about social situations. I didn't have to worry about anything because it made everything click. As the semester went on, I knew those consequences were coming down the pipe. Consequences that maybe in high school would have made me, all right, I gotta buckle down and study for this test because I have to do well. I was able to say, okay, well, I'm just gonna drink more. I had as much structure as college can offer. You could pick like a course track, and you got, based on your interests, put with like 20 other freshmen, and you guys all took the same classes.
Okay.
So there were people that I went to class enough for them to know me and know I should be showing up, and to have made friends with some of them, but not well enough where I really cared what they thought of me. I did have to show up for like a final exam group presentation, and I was drunk.
Okay.
But they told me what to say, and I said it, and
you got through it.
And I got through it. Everything else I failed. I got 3 semesters worth of failing grades at Georgia State. I actually joined a fraternity second semester because I thought my issue was I wasn't socializing enough because I was just staying in my dorm room drinking and smoking weed, and joining a fraternity would just get me out, and again, it would be a group of people to hold me accountable to good grades. But the only thing that happened was once they realized what my GPA was, they just said, well, you can't officially be a fraternity member, but you went through Rush, so you can hang out with us. So I got all the benefits with none of the dues. And then I think at that point, Dad was like, what is going on?
Yeah.
And so he gave me one more semester to sort of get it right, and I went to an academic advisor because they put me on probation after the second semester, and she was just like, I'm gonna sign you up for these 2 courses that are like guaranteed A's if you just show up. And I just couldn't show up, and I had moved off campus for this 3rd semester. By that time, I didn't really draw a sober breath. I wasn't drinking in the mornings yet, but I was waking up and smoking weed. I had to have something. The illusions were starting to wear off that like I could get it. I'll get it together next time, next semester, next class. Other people were starting to notice. Again, I think I look back and what was my relationship with alcohol, and I chose alcohol over everything, and that was really apparent that semester, where it was clear I chose it over school. It was clear that I chose it over my hobbies. It was clear I chose it over girlfriends and friends. It was clear that I chose it over family when I would go home and visit. Thinking back about why was education so important? Well, that's what normal people do. And there was nothing in my life that I could say, well, normal people do this, I was living an abnormal lifestyle. I was suicidal and miserable, and woke up and chemically dependent and had to treat it every morning. And I knew that, and I think I hadn't crossed whatever invisible line was there really, but I'd come right to the edge of it. My older sister came to Atlanta to visit Mom, and we went out to dinner, and I was shaking a little bit. And not bad, but enough for her to notice, until like we ordered drinks and I was able to get a drink down. And so she sort of had an idea, and I imagine she said something to my parents. But I don't remember any sort of intervention type, like or specific questions. So I was miserable enough. I knew I was going to fail school again, and essentially fail out. And I called my dad and broke down and just said, I don't know what's going on. And he said, well, you can move back here and we'll figure it out, or I'm cutting you off financially. So he was prepared to do that, and I moved back, and so I went to therapy and did some like a series of tests. The first day, like 3 hours of testing. But I remember like that testing plus like an hour session with my therapist, and dude, you don't need to, you need to go to AA. I still had some power of choice. I think I was able to like, okay, I'll go to AA, and I'll try this without much of a fight. it was recommended that I go to 12-step recovery, and I went to a 12-step meeting at a local detox center, and I went by myself, and I didn't go back again. There was something about 12-step recovery that it didn't click that time, but pretty quickly it just resonated with me. And I think in some healthy ways and in some unhealthy ways. But I didn't initially get sober. I tested the waters for a couple months. I stopped drinking for a while, but was still smoking weed because that wasn't a problem.
Right. Yeah.
But I kept messing up, you know? Mm-hmm. I realized that I treated weed the same way that I treated alcohol. I was enrolled at Greenville Tech, and again, just some easy courses to get back into the flow school, and I wasn't drinking, so everything was going to work out, but I was smoking weed, and my stepmom had surgery recently, so I had some of her painkillers because she took like 2 and then forgot about them. Which is so weird. So it was like a really nice semester of doing exactly what I would have done drinking. And so I did that for a while. Eventually I learned that I really liked the setting of 12-step recovery, and I think I liked like that I was sort of special and unique, and that I was 19, 20, 21, sobering up, and and when people spoke about their feelings, that resonated with me. And so I knew it was a place to go. And I did the same thing here that I'd been doing in Atlanta, you know, and now I was under the watchful eye of my parents, and they said, get a job, go back to school, volunteer, do something, get out of this house. I wasn't allowed to be in the house from like 9 to 5.
Okay.
So I would drive around. Oftentimes I'd drive around getting high and or drinking. And like sometimes I'd park at Cleveland Park and I'd see like my stepmom walking our dogs.
Oh my goodness.
You know, because I was supposed to be in school, or I was supposed to be at a job, or I was supposed to be...
You're supposed to be functioning.
Yeah, I was supposed to be, you know, doing what other normal human beings were doing.
Okay.
And so I hit another bottom that had less to do with the amount I was consuming, or I wasn't drinking a lot, you know. I had been introduced to a solution. I wasn't quite ready for that solution, but I knew enough that I wasn't drinking as much, and the weed was doing the trick, and it was appeasing the beast for the time being. I just was getting really uncomfortable again. But again, luckily I'd been exposed to AA, and I picked up a white chip one night and got a sponsor and a home group, and that's something I'd never done. And then 6 months into that, I moved down to Atlanta. My dad and stepmom were kind of just done with me at that point, you know, and they said, you got to get a job, or you got to get out of here. And I think I was too afraid to put myself out there to get a job. But my uncles had just opened a factory south of Atlanta, and I knew I was guaranteed a job with no effort. And so I moved down to Atlanta, and then I fell in with a 12-step group that really shaped my recovery and shaped my life. And it was an all-men's group. Didn't care that I was a young, cool guy in recovery. I identified me as just another drunk on the bus, and a very diverse group where, you know, in Greenville, it's not super diverse, but you go down to Atlanta, and I'm in meetings with guys who were on the street smoking crack for 10 years, and I'm relating and identifying with them, and they sort of taught me the ins and outs of 12-step recovery, and taught me about taking personal responsibility for my life, and taught me about what it meant to be a sober man. On the spectrum of 12-step recovery groups, these guys would probably be classified as like hardcore militant
Old school.
Old school. You know, I would get told stuff like, stop talking to me about your problems and go find someone to help who has real problems. You know, you have a year sober, you have 2 years sober, go find somebody with a day.
No woe is me.
Yeah.
No self-pity allowed.
Stop taking up space. Contribute. And don't just contribute in the various 12-step meetings, but contribute in life. This is how you contribute at work. This is how you contribute to your family. It was very intensive, and it was very structured, and there was a lot of accountability. I got sober officially after my 21st, but there was a couple months there where I wasn't drinking. I was just
that was in when you were like smoking all the
yeah.
Okay.
So I had never had the experience of, you know, being able to
like walk up to the bar and order a drink.
I mean, I had a fake ID, but I wasn't super confident in it, you know. But I could go with total confidence anywhere I wanted and get whatever I wanted, and the excuse to like try a lot of different stuff and buy a lot of different things.
It's almost like a rite of passage.
Yeah.
Or something. Okay.
I picked up as bad or worse than when I left off. I also hadn't ever had a job in active addiction. So not only did I have a job, but I had low expenses because even though I wasn't living with my uncle, I was living at one of his properties and paying him not very much rent. And nepotism is a wonderful thing sometimes, you know. And I was in this job and getting paid this salary pretty much exclusively due to nepotism and the reputation I had built while sober in Atlanta.
For being such a good guy.
Yeah. Not just out on my own, out in the middle of nowhere with like no neighbors, you know, a 500-foot driveway,
Right.
and just me, the trees, and the deer. It escalated quickly. It was pretty much from the time that I got off work, the time that I passed out.
Okay.
You know, whatever time that would have been. And then pretty quickly transitioned into, you know, having a bottle in my car and drinking on my lunch break and drinking in the mornings. And I was working in an office setting, surrounded by, you know, at least some of the people knew that I was like a sober guy.
You weren't
you know?
supposed to be drinking. Yeah.
And so my direct boss, my uncle's like number 3 in the company, would say stuff like, gosh, I would have just hated to see what you were like when you were drunk, you know, when I'd like failed to complete some task, or it was day 2 on a project that should have been a half a day, or whatever the case may be. But what he was really saying is, I know that you're drinking, dude, and it's hard to get away with, especially with the way that I was just existing to drink. So I was living in this remote property, and I wasn't bathing on a regular basis because my pipes had burst, and when your pipes burst, that also means like that washer doesn't run very well, or the laundry machine doesn't really work, and when you're passing out, you're not brushing your teeth before you go to bed, or like taking out your contacts, you know, and so, but still I like, you know, was going to work every day as like the, you know, part of the owning family, and trying to keep it together, and wearing lots of deodorant, lots of French showers, and it just didn't work, because every once in a while you get sober just enough to catch a glimpse of reality, or when you're living like that to catch like a whiff of yourself. So it didn't come to an end at this point, but the turning point was I was living in Jersey, and one night I was ready to die. You know, I was ready to kill myself, and I got the rope, and I tested. I tied it up and I tested it, make sure it would hold my weight, and for whatever reason didn't go through with it that night and finished the bottle of whatever I had. At that point it was a lot of Captain Morgan and Coke. I don't know why. The worst hangovers, that spiced rum. But so I was in a really, really bad place, and the next morning I got a call that my little sister had been diagnosed with cancer. That diagnosis saved my life because it gave me an out. It allowed me to say I need to go home to be close to my family, and my uncles agreed. Everyone agreed that I needed to get out of Jersey. It sort of allowed everyone to do so without saying you're messing up. So I was able to come home, and even though I didn't stop drinking, I was in a safe place again. I was able to come back and have some purpose and show up for my family, but the fact was I was able to hide and slide under the radar amid all this chaos and with her diagnosis, and so that's what I did for another 6 months until the storm sort of calmed. She was diagnosed with leukemia, and okay, so she has leukemia. And then it was, all right, what kind of leukemia? Okay, it's the most treatable kind. And then, okay, so there's this breakthrough miracle drug discovered about 10 years ago, and if her body responds well to it, she has a really good shot at living a normal life. And a couple months in, okay, she's responding in the 99th percentile. And so after the initial diagnosis, everything else has been really positive, and she's living a really good life today. That's such a good reminder for me, the parallels of our illness. And what I like to remind myself and guys I work with, professionally or personally, is that I have access to a solution that enhances my life. The thing that saves my life also makes my life better. Her solution, the thing that saves her life, this pill, makes her life more difficult, and but I don't ever hear her complain about it. I've sat with her and held her while she's had a panic attack because of the stress and the emotion and the fear, but day in, day out, she takes this pill that makes her life worse. And it's just such a good reminder for me that I just have to take my daily medicine and I get to live just an awesome life. So I sober up and I reconnect with an old sponsor. I sobered up on a con. Okay. I knew that I was going to be getting kicked out in January, so I sobered up late November, thinking that my parents would not kick me out sober, and they did, because they had learned. I had sobered up, but we had made an agreement that I would be out January 1st, and they said, we expect you to hold to that agreement, and I had time to do that, and I didn't. If I had anything lined up, they said, okay, well, we can be flexible until you get there, but I didn't. So they kicked me out, and I was able to move in with my older sister, but I was furious because I was doing so well.
It wasn't fair.
At a month sober, and it just was not right. So I was going to hike the AT, and that was going to be how I got sober. God had other ideas, and I tore my ACL playing soccer. But this connection to the wilderness didn't really die out. My sponsor's wife worked at this wilderness treatment center called Four Circles. She said you should check it out, and I was coming off this knee surgery, but I was rehabbing and was moving pretty well again, and so I went up there for an interview, and I'll never forget, I was asked, what's your thought on treatment? And I was right back in the meat and the heart of 12-step recovery, and I looked my soon-to-be boss dead in the eye. I said, well, I think it's $50,000 for a big book. And because I had this internal dialogue, dude, you gotta be honest, no matter what the personal cost, because I had never been honest fully with anyone. And so I did eventually get hired. Months later, I said, do you remember that interview? Like, do you remember what I said? And he said, yes, I remember, Chris, but I'll be honest, we needed some warm bodies at that point. So, and it was, again, an important lesson for me that if I'm honest and I was going to get the job no matter what. I had a good recommendation. It wouldn't have sit right with me and my values if I had sugarcoated how I felt.
Right.
I've now been able to grow and to expand my opinion on the various paths to recovery, but I was able to be true to myself at that.